That's the great thing about these enthusiast markets is you can be anybody and feel this level of performance and feel that confidence from the front end. It doesn't matter if you're going to win Glen Helen. You
Right.
can still appreciate, having that magical ride where you're 30% better than you were before you made this change.
Yeah.
And you
It's
have
crazy.
so much confidence around the front end.
Phil Tsiaras from Sirris Suspension. Welcome to the Gear Shed podcast, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, dude, no worries. I think for anybody in the electric dirt bike space, anybody who has ambitions to build the ultimate electric dirt bike or E-moto, I know for a fact that Cirrus comes into the conversation. So I'm thankful that you were able to come on today, take a little bit of time out of your schedule, which I know is absolute insanity based on all the events that you guys attend, and just come hang out and kind of answer questions that I think most people in the general public don't have a firm understanding of about, where Cirrus came from and things like that. So it's super helpful for us and the community as a whole to be able to sit down and talk with somebody from one of the pioneers of the industry that we all have kind of fallen in love with. So thanks again, man. I'm stoked to hear it. The story of Cirrus, the original time that, I connected with Graham on a Zoom call, I knew very little about the industry at that time. I knew there was opportunity. I didn't know what type of opportunity would be there, but I saw an industry that was growing. And there was an interesting conversation that him and I had about market cap and about what the market cap looks like in the future, as a direct result of the electric dirt bike industry. I don't remember the exact figures, but obviously all of this stuff was probably in discussion during your guys' board meetings and when you guys were making huge life changes to decide to come from your previous positions and just kind of go all in on a thing that was kind of fringe at the time. So for that, I want to know a little bit about you, just a little bit about your background, where you came from, the stuff that you did prior to Cirrus starting, and what motivated you to take that leap. So just kind of take the floor and just give a little bit of background about your personal information and like where you came from and how you ended up here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I started my career at Honda Motorcycle right out of college. Not terribly far from you, right? I
Yeah,
forget what city you're in
yeah,
now.
I'm in Columbus, man. Marysville's not far.
I was right on the outskirts of Columbus. I remember the first place I lived was Dublin, um,
Yeah.
which was a cute little suburb, and then commuting to Marysville. And yeah, so Honda was, I would say, it was a great experience. I was a chassis engineer in the motorcycle group, so working on suspension components. And we were a lot smaller at the time. We were just starting to do localized development as opposed to having the development in Japan. So we were creating models from the ground up. I think at the time we were pretty much doing everything except for the motors. And that was an incredible learning experience because we had so many Japanese associates there who were basically training us to be to be an R&D group. And I found them to be just an incredible mix of knowledge and experience and inspiration. I had a really good experience at Honda, and then after Honda, I did go to grad school to do business, and then came out and went to Fox Factory.
So how long were you at Honda? Like, what was your tenureship there? How long were you there for?
2000 to 2007.
Okay, so it was 7 years. That's a big chunk of time.
Yeah, yeah. Then 2 years of grad school, 2 years of another startup, a small startup, and then I went to Fox after that startup. And the startup was unrelated. We were in the defense industry, and we created a communication product and then sold it to a larger defense company. And then I went to work for Fox. And so my experience at Honda was all about suspension. I mean, as a suspension engineer there, you're working on the kinematics of the machine. So you're responsible for tire and brakes and geometry and all these things, wheels and tires. But you're also responsible for the shock absorbers, fork and shock. And so I had experience, working with primarily KYB and Showa. And then so I could use that as I went to Fox as we were sort of building out the Fox Power Sport group. So So at the time back then in 2011, Fox was mostly a bicycle company.
Yeah.
At that time, that's what we were known for. The bicycle group was pretty big. I'd say their product was largely evolved, and they were doing really well in that market. They're still doing well in that market. And then our goal was really to grow power sports and to find opportunities with the Fox brand of power sports. So working in California, Scotts Valley, California, um, and working primarily on UTVs at that time, but we had some motorcycle product and snowmobile and a couple other things. And so Fox grew tremendously over the 11
It
years
seems
there.
like Fox never stops growing. They're like always on the forefront of like, which is kind of leading you into this a bit, but they're always on the forefront of, development for, like my Raptor had the Fox shocks on it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in anything, when you get a product, whether that's a power sports product or an automobile, and it comes with Fox, you have like, you know, a kit, you have premium on your car or vehicle or UTV or whatever it is directly from the factory. And I think that's like they've always just been those people. It seems like that they've always kind of tackled like the new thing and like really developed their product lines.
Yeah, I appreciate those words. We worked really hard at it. I was eventually responsible for engineering for powered vehicles for bicycle. They had their own engineering team. We had our own engineering team, and and the company was a lot bigger than when I joined. I think at that point we had maybe 100 engineers in powered vehicles across a couple different segments, and we were really working to keep that brand relevant by trying to make things that were faithful to our engineering requirements, and then let the branding follow the engineering and the performance. And I had I had a great experience at Fox.
Yeah.
Still, I'm pretty close to a lot of the people there. Fox treated me well, and I think we did a lot of important work in a bunch of these segments, like side by side and truck. And I feel a lot of pride over some of those products that we created. I think some of the passive solutions for things like side by sides and trucks, where we could do position sensitive damping in different ways, was really exciting. But the electronics that we created, that we came out with on things like snowmobile and side by side and truck, I think really changed the game. And behind the scenes, it took a tremendous amount of work to do, what we did, what we created, and we
Yeah.
really had to create systems very different than what had previously been existing in areas like cars where you saw electronic suspension, in order to survive the rigors of what we were doing on these high performance vehicles. And it was an amazing experience.
What's a testing day look like? Do you just you build it, like you think you got it under control, and you put it on whatever vehicle it is, and they just go out and absolutely obliterate it, and then you guys figure out how to fix all the imperfections? Is that like what it looks like?
More or less, I mean, it's just the scientific process. I think
What a cool scientific process. That is really cool.
we had a great time, and I think that we did everything possible to keep the brand aspirational and make things that really delivered on the promise. And I think Fox did excellent at it. And Kent, who you also know,
Yeah, 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 Kent.
Kent ran testing for powered vehicles.
Of course he did.
And so we worked together there. And then before that, Ken had been at Olin's, so I hired him from Olin's, and so he ran that team. I think there were about 45 people, and I think Fox had probably the biggest and the best test lab in the world doing this sort of thing for off road suspension. And Kent, I think largely built that. And so we would do everything possible to make sure these products were safe and they passed all of our physical testing before we, put it under an app.
Yeah,
I think,
right, for sure.
you go back in time to the beginning of the whole UTV thing, and these things were relatively slow, but where they are now, you're going really fast and you're having huge energy events. Same with the Raptor.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
I think when things go wrong, there's a lot of danger there. And we always used to say, like, we want the vehicle to fall apart around the shock absorber.
Yeah,
We
yeah, I
want
can
the shock
imagine.
to be the strongest thing in the vehicle. And there's a lot of parallels here to what we're doing at Cirrus. I don't want to say we're copying those things at Fox, but we're using some of the same principles, because I think if you're trying to make the best products, that's the right thing to do for the customer.
Right,
You know,
right.
put our fork on an E-Ride Pro SR. Um, I think that fork right now is good enough to last for 3 E-Ride Pro SRs. We are very concerned about the durability, the materials, and the surface finishes, and the general calculations that go into the strength, where that customer can do anything knowing that the one thing that won't fail in them is the fork and the shock in the case of the Ultra B product. And we think that if we're delivering on our brand promise, then that's what our customers should expect from us: extreme durability and extreme performance.
I don't know anybody who's put this kit or a Cirrus kit on their bike that has ever had a problem. And it goes all the way back to the very beginning. And when I was explaining this to Nate and we were talking on a previous podcast, it goes all the way back to the install video. And I know that that may sound arbitrary and may not make sense, but I hadn't worked on a motorcycle in 10 years. I got into the son races dirt bikes, were always involved. I decided I want to start this business. So we started this business. And I got the Sirris forks for my Ultra B. I hadn't installed a single thing on a dirt bike in 10 years. And I pulled up a YouTube video, branded, built by Sirris, and every single step of the process was exactly as it was supposed to be. Everything was in the box. Everything was exactly as described. There were no discrepancies between what I was holding and what I was looking at and what was being shown on the installation video. Everything was perfect, and it walked me through it. And a person who hadn't installed anything in 10 years on a motorcycle was able to go to their garage with common tools and put the product on with 100% accuracy. Guys who have never done this before will be able to put your stuff on the right way the first time, just because you took the time to make sure that that stuff was there for them.
I'll say this: I think when you start a company, you have to pick a point of balance between how much risk do you take by investing into the business. Um, for example, like, we have a modern factory with a production line that wouldn't look that different from a well-established suspension manufacturer that was making OE product, and a quality department and quality systems and modern software and all the things that you might find at a bigger company. That allows us to offer better quality. It allows us to scale more easily. All these things, though, are investments. And when you invest in them as a new company, you're investing into revenue that's not there yet. And so it's a difficult compromise when you sort of make these decisions. But I think for us, we started this saying, we want to build the best stuff. Number one, clear position, right?
Yeah,
How do
you want to
you
be the best.
I have this design question between option A or option B. What do you pick? Always whatever gives you the best performance.
Right, right.
That governs everything we do. And then we want to try to take care of our customers as well as we're able, given our size and resource constraints. And so, I would urge anybody who's having problems with their product or can't quite get the setup right or whatever it is, just email us. Doesn't matter who you are, whether you're media or somebody else. You'll get a response from us, usually same day, and we'll do whatever we can to help you out. And I think that goes hand in hand with trying to offer the very best performance, is try to help people realize it with their specific riding style on their motorcycle with whatever modifications they have. And I think that's what we want the brand to stand for. And we're doing our best. I don't think we're perfect at all, but I think that us trying really hard is totally genuine.
That stuff shows, right? And I think you guys need to be told that from time to time, because it's very easy, especially when you're going through things that the surface doesn't always tell the story, right? There's always more than behind the scenes that's going on that you can't. It's not anybody's business, most importantly, but like it's not even, you don't have the time to like talk through all that. So it's good to hear. I just think that you guys should know that you guys have set a precedent in the industry, and we're the riders, the people that really ride these bikes. I mean, it is night and day when we get on Sirris suspension. Why does your suspension, specifically the Trail Tune, which I believe is probably a bulk of the sales? I don't know that to be fact, but I would assume that that's probably a bulk of all the sales that you make, in various weight configurations. Why do you think? What did you guys do from the beginning to make the forks and the shock as responsive, as plush, and as comfortable as you did? Like, how did you do that? Because I've never gotten on a bike of any kind that feels the way my Ultra B does, or any kit or any bike with Cirrus on it. Like, so what is the philosophy there, and how can I like connect those dots from like a just a normal guy who doesn't work in suspension every single day?
Yeah, I'm going to try to talk about this in a way that's not too dorky,
Okay.
but it is really the answer, right? And because we could talk all day about like piston design or piston band design or any of these technical details, but I think that the philosophy of Cirrus is that you can be at a company where you tell everybody what to do or to take care of your customer and order people around. Our philosophy is not that. Cirrus, from the very, very beginning, has always been about the people. I believe that if you're gonna start something new and you're gonna be positioned the way that we are, you need to find the best people. And you need to empower them and stay out of their way. Let them do their best work. Create a great environment for great people, and the rest kind of takes care of itself. And so when you look at our company, I talked about my background. We touched on Kent a little bit, and you've met Mike, I think, at TKO as
Mm-hmm.
well,
Yep.
who's got an extensive shock design background. Matt wasn't there. Matt also has an extensive shock design background with not Fox, but a couple other companies like Showa. And then we've got two guys, Enrico and Claudio, who are older than me and have an even more extensive design background in moto, forks and shocks. And these are some of the guys that used to run Marzocchi back in the day in Italy. And then we've been working with Pietro and Andriani for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
our
Yeah.
tuning.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think 31 world championships under his
Yeah.
belt.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
He's actually
freaking guy's a savage, and he's so cool. And he's just like, it's so crazy to see like at TKO, like all the carnage that's taking place, and everything's just like boom, rebuild, new oil, new springs, new shims. Okay, that didn't feel good. What can we do to make it better? Like, that was just a crazy experience to watch all that happen.
so I think as a new company, um, I think on the development side, we would say we hired a whole bunch of all stars.
Yeah.
I think hired is a loose word because many of these people have committed their own money. We're basically funded largely by
Self-funded. Yeah.
our employees who have put our own, retirement savings into this. And so people have made just as big a jump as I have. And I think I would argue these are some of the best people in the world at what they do. So when you say like, why does the fork feel the way it is? I think we're talking about people who have been doing this for 30 years,
Right.
who have won world championships in gas.
Right.
I mean, this is not, we're not right out of college. I mean, yeah, we're creaky and a little old,
Yeah.
not as
I'm
fast.
right. I'm not far behind you, brother.
Yeah, but we're trying to bring everything from our career into this new space that's changing really fast. And honestly, we're trying to create a company that people love being at.
Right.
That's a new opportunity for them to do their best work when they're presented with that decision, A or B. What's the right decision? Always go
Right.
toward performance. Always go
Right.
toward what's best for the customer. You get at a lot of big companies where it's not that simple anymore, right?
No. No.
It's complicated and it's hard to make these decisions. And so our mission is simple in comparison and fast, in terms of like length of development and speed of decision making. And I think that's pretty powerful and it's manifested in the end result. But this company is absolutely about the people. And I haven't even talked about the factory yet or
Right.
Josh
Right.
and Pappy in marketing.
Right.
Josh, who used to run marketing for us at Fox for
Yeah.
P&G, did all our Fox stuff.
Yeah.
He is unbelievable,
Right.
So these are great people.
For people that don't have an extensive business background, I wouldn't say that I have an extensive one, but uh, I have several companies that I've built and that I still have that, luckily I have decision makers that are able to do the day-to-day stuff, and executives like way above my intelligence level and pay grade that we've been able to empower and put them in positions to make decisions for the business on our behalf, right? You're in the Goldilocks zone is what I call it. You're getting to the point of profitability. You're putting kits on the street. You're putting kits on bikes. You're attending events. You're being there, right? You're present, and you are also still small enough to remain nimble. When you're still smaller, and that's why I love doing this. We're very small. I could make a decision today. I only have to tell 2 or 3 people, 4 people, and we're good, and we can go a different direction, right? And everybody's like, oh, okay, and that can be handled on a group text message. That's not something you can do when you get to a certain level in the business. And that's where you guys are. It feels like that's where you guys are at. You're in a Goldilocks zone where you guys can pivot quickly. If something's not working, you can stop today, retool, and just start over. And it's not this big tidal wave of decision making that has to occur in order to start moving in a different direction. So it's just cool that, because I remember the day I talked to Graham, it was you guys hadn't even released the forks yet, right? Like, so I can't
Right.
even tell. I mean, who knows the amount of money that had gone into that launch and all the investment that was made to just get to the point of being able to sell one fork and shock. Like, that is
Yeah.
a monumental task that I think some people oftentimes overlook. And but you can tell that all of that time and everything that you did really laid the groundwork and the foundation for what you guys are trying to achieve next.
Yeah, I hope that that's the case as the years unfold. I would argue that that this Goldilocks zone can extend for years, and I think when you see companies, the more people you get, the more difficult it is to manage these large groups of humans, essentially, right? Like, people are
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah,
They're always the biggest challenge of any company. They're the greatest part of the company and the biggest challenge at the same time. But I think that, good companies can get fairly big and still have great cultures and empowerment
hmm,
and still treat their employees very, very well. And bad companies start having problems when they're quite small. And so I think that our goal is, I think that if we do the right things from a cultural standpoint, then we think we got a lot of runway. And I think this Goldilocks period can last quite some time in terms of company scale. But you need to pay attention to the most important part of the equation every time, which is the people.
yeah,
You take care of the people will take care of the company. And so Sirris is 100%. I know I'm repeating myself. Sirris is 100% about the people involved. That's who's doing all this. That's who's behind it. That's
right.
the reason for everything we've done so far.
What was the thought, and how did you come to the conclusion that, okay, we want to start a suspension company, but we want to do it for electric dirt bikes?
Yeah.
How did that like connect? Where did that come from?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a dirt biker, so I think that's a factor, right? I mean, I've been riding for a while, ever since the Honda days, where the whole development group were riders, and almost all of them a lot better than me. And so I'm interested in the sport, and
Yeah,
I've been
yeah,
riding gas bikes forever, right?
yeah,
And I'm also really interested in the way that new markets develop and change, and I think that those periods of change are fascinating, both in the standpoint of like very rapid evolution of the models and the technology, but also very rapid evolution of the business and the opportunities in that business.
right.
And I think we went through this, at Fox with side by side, and the power sport industry is sort of all about sort of these new niches that sort of come about and then develop really rapidly into something that looks quite different than where it started, right? You your ATV side by sides, kind of farm implements originally, and I think as somebody who deeply loves product development, I like product development more than I like riding, and
That's
so
crazy.
I think that for somebody that loves creating things for customers that are enthusiasts that care deeply about what we're making for them, I think there's nothing like being in a segment that's changing and evolving this fast. It is so much fun to sort of read that change and try to get out in front of it. And I think with gas bikes, what are you going to do with gas bikes? You got, you got KTM who owns WP. You got, the Japanese brands who primarily work with their Japanese suppliers and have really strong internal connections in Japan. And so I think opportunity beyond that is more limited. And I think gas bikes have a problem long term, which is, I'm not going to say it's emissions because I think the emissions are irrelevant to the
Right. I mean,
whole
I would
scheme.
agree. Yeah,
Makes
I
a
would
difference.
agree.
But noise as population increases is a problem. And I feel like in the industry, we've been watching this and all this, the surveys for years and years and years and closing tracks and closing riding areas. Um, I love motorcycles. I would love to be like teaching my grandkids someday how to
Yeah.
ride motorcycles. I
Yeah.
hope to ride as long as I can.
Yeah. I'm right there with you.
Um, I saw this electric movement as like, man, maybe we can stem some of these negative trends. Maybe we can even grow it a lot,
Right.
turn it into like the next big thing. Because I just think two wheels is so much fun. I love the four wheel stuff, but two wheels has a really unique place in my life. And I'd love to see formulas where we can grow the sport. I got nothing against gas bikes. I still own gas bikes,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
but I think eliminating the noise could be a really important part of growing sport.
Yeah. Well, not even so that it's the noise. And I never even really connected the dots on that. Although you hear it all the time about, just like our neighbors. My son has a turn track in the backyard, and when he's out there on his 250 or his 125, like the neighbors, they don't love it, right? And I get that. I don't love the sound of it, to be honest with you. It's not my favorite thing to wake up to. But there's a sense of freedom on two wheels that if you've never experienced it, you'll never get it driving in a side by side, my personal opinion. You'll never get it on a four wheeler, my personal opinion. And maybe some would say that that's not true, but there's something about the nimbleness. There's something about the twist of the throttle. There's something about that whole experience. Like you have to be in tune with the thing that's like propelling you through whatever terrain at whatever speed that makes you feel alive. And it really does,
I think so. I mean, I think motorcycles are so important in my life personally,
Yeah.
on and off road.
Yeah.
Both the history in both of them. And I just love them, and nothing makes me feel the same way. I will say I love side by sides, and it's like a different thing, and I think
Yeah.
they're super cool for what they are. But for me personally, I love motorcycles, and it's inseparable from my life story. And I hope to ride them as long as I'm physically able.
Sirris took an interesting line on this, in my opinion, because you didn't go after the largest segment of the market first, which, from an outsider's perspective, is borderline crazy. Because the amount of bikes there was really, I mean, when you came out with your first kit, it was only available on an Ultra B. It didn't matter whatever bike it was. Like that was the bike it was built for. What was the philosophy and the thought process behind like not going after the we'll call it the small size E-moto market? You going after the mid size, which is obviously a much smaller segment. Why did you guys make that decision? I've always been interested in this answer.
You knew this market was going to change rapidly from the beginning. Had been exposed to electric cars, working with OEs at Fox, and that side of the automotive business, and you could see the way that like drivetrain technologies were changing and battery technologies were changing. And so I remember this was way back when I went to Fox and I bought a Lightbee.
Yeah.
I sold like a TTR 125. This is for my wife. Sold the
Yeah.
TTR 125, got a Lightbee, and
I've ridden that light B, by the way.
yes, you have.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's
Sorry.
still
Sorry,
around.
Phil's wife.
Yeah, this early gen Lightbee, and like a lot of people, especially back then,
Yeah.
these things were brand new. She liked it. She's a big mountain biker, but she's never really taken to motorcycles.
Yeah, of course.
And she liked it because it was easy to ride. And then I started riding the darn thing in the backyard and on little tracks and things like that. I'm like, this thing's so much fun, right? It's nothing like my gas bike, my KTM, but it's so much fun for what it is. But you could look at those technologies where they were at that time, and you knew that there was going to be this very rapid evolution.
Yeah.
Where they would change from what was essentially considered like a toy or used for street usage at the beginning to something that was a very legitimate motorcycle, and you just knew that that had potential to happen very quickly, depending upon how the OE sort of lined up around their model planning. And so we wanted to go after the midsize market because electrification is a funny thing. It is always hampered by battery technology.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen this incredibly rapid evolution of motors, for example, and controllers and associated, components in the system. But batteries just kind of march along like this every year. And so it just looked like, based on doing the math and the evolution of batteries, that the midsize segment was the first segment where you could legitimately compete as a gas bike against a gas bike in certain scenarios, right?
Right.
And so I think we've seen that with modified Ultra Bs. I mean, I'm 5'9", and if there's like a nasty woods course, I'm unquestionably faster on a modified Ultra B than on my KTM 350.
Yeah. 100%.
Because KTM's a handful.
It's a whole job. It's a full-time job.
I've been riding them my whole life, and probably never would have known it could be this much easier, except the Ultra B now exists. But I mean, man, I can ride that thing fast through nasty woods.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the situation where like a modified Ultra B is no longer a toy. It is a woods weapon if you have it set up properly, and it is a
100%.
sign of where this market can go from a technology standpoint.
Yeah.
And just look at the what Benell's talking about with their 805.
Yeah.
And the Dust Moto. These are like modified Ultra Bs, except better.
Yeah.
I would argue, because we've tuned on both of them and they're fantastic.
God, it's just so hard to listen to somebody say that about my baby, because it provides so much evidence that, people think Chinese manufacturing, right? That's what they think. Oh, it's from China, whatever. They built such a good bike, and I have beaten the holy crap out of my Ultra B, and I know many more people have beat them up a lot harder than I have. And for Dust to come in, for Benell to come in, and to start to attack that market, I was always wondering when that was going to happen, right? Like when is somebody going to step up to the king? Because even if those bikes are fantastic, it's still going to be hard to be better than the Ultra B. And I'm sure those bikes are fantastic, like especially the Dust in particular. So much time has gone into developing that bike. It's as beautiful as a Stark Varg. And I always called my Stark Varg a piece of jewelry. Like when you go out there and see it, and you're just like, God, that thing is beautiful, but I would still walk past it every single day to get on something that was just more manageable and more fun. And my buddy is a KTM 300 rider. He came and bought another small size E-moto for his wife, and then he came back and bought one for him. And then he's like, dude, like these bikes are just, it's not that they're better. They can't do everything better, for sure. That's the facts. But for what they are, and it's just a lower level of commitment. Like you're saying about your wife, my wife would have never got on a motorcycle. Like I wouldn't have got my 4-year-old daughter. I mean, I know a lot of kids ride PW50s, but I wouldn't have got her that, right? Like I just probably wouldn't have done that, just because it's kind of annoying. You got to deal with it. You got to put gas in it. It's a big commitment to go out and start a gas motorcycle. But if you can just go out and flip a key and toss your leg over something, put it in a mode that's just comfortable for you and tool around the backyard, you're going to spend, and this is like my selling point to people who ride gas bikes, you will spend more time riding a motorcycle if you have an electric one, simply because of the lower level of commitment, the ability to ride in places that you can never ride before. And I really believe that that's what's happening in this market and in the moto community right now, is people are starting to wake up to the fact that, like, man, this is just so easy. And like, what do I have to do? Not much. Tighten the chain, grease your axles occasionally. Don't, low pressure when you're washing it. Like, simple stuff, put it in your garage, take care of your battery, and you can ride it for 5 years. Like,
Yeah,
what? That's crazy.
that's true. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounded like I was being tough on Suron Ultra B before, and I was and I wasn't. I think you've seen our Suron Ultra B.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it has been through a lot,
Yeah, I can imagine.
a lot of miles, a lot of testing. Um, that was an amazing bike. Is an amazing bike. Like, what a point in time where they made something that just completely changed the game. And I would say I personally love that bike because and as a result, I have a lot of respect for Suron Engineering
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
they made something that just, the geometry is fantastic and the durability is also really, really good. As long as you're taking modification out of the conversation, because
Right,
it's when
right.
people start modifying it that things start kind of going wrong. But I have the utmost respect for them, and I hope that I hope that we see them continue to
Yeah,
up the game, right?
yeah. Me too. I'm right there with you, brother, because and I don't think you were hard on them. I think it's just, I have such an affinity for that motorcycle because it's that, if we think about, like, there's like crossroads in your life, right? That motorcycle changed my life. Like, it changed the trajectory of where I was going as a human being. And like, I will always be like just a complete loyalist to that bike. Particularly, I have a Light B that we bought 5 or 6 years ago, also the very first one,
Yeah,
and that thing is still around and it's still doing its thing and it's still running and it still hasn't had any issues. Like, yeah, we've
yeah,
broken stuff on it because we wrecked it, but like, just, and that comes from a company like, and I'm sure that they have riders that they're R&Ding with and they're developing based on like real riders and things like that. But you still got to think, like, I think a lot of times American motocross and American motorcycle riding is kind of put a little bit lower than like the European class of like riders and how they ride. But I would venture to say that, like, America, I mean, I don't know if there's anybody that's harder on bikes than Americans, and for
oh,
that bike to perform and survive, like, come on.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's a company of riders. I don't know if most people realize that, Suron. And all the engineers that I've met from Suron are fantastic people. I must admit I know very little about what they're going to do. I don't
Yeah,
have
yeah,
any visibility around their plans. But I do think the Ultra B was this magical moment in time, and that's really what we were trying to hit at the beginning of the company. We made those products.
right.
We were trying to hit the first bikes that would, compete against gas bikes in certain categories, like something like TKO would be an
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
And we knew it needed a little bit more power, and Suron's tried to address that in 25. Um, I think the Benell and the Dust go a lot further
Hmm.
in terms of power and handling and a whole bunch of other details. I think they're really going to push the industry, and I think that's the best possible thing for customers. I can't wait. I can't wait. And as much as I think the Ultra B changed the game, I think some of these new bikes are going to change the game again. And I think everybody should be, really excited about that.
I think most people are, right? And, we, as in you and myself and others in the industry, have this very unique opportunity to be involved in like riding. Like, if you're a normal person, right? You buy one bike. Like, you do, like, a lot of people do a ton of research. They think about it. They're making a huge decision. It's not like a small financial decision. And they get that one machine. That's all they get, is one machine, where we have the luxury of like, 3 or 4 bikes, and we're kind of riding everything, and we get to test out a bunch of different things, and we get to see how everything feels. And that's a unique position. And I think just to see people that are attacking that mid-sized market is going to push the industry, which is just good for everybody.
I think
And
so too.
yeah, it's gonna be a really fun, like, this next 5 years, everything is going to be different than what, I mean, you got to think 5 years ago in the electric dirt bike space. Where were we? Fox 40s on Sur Light Bees. Here we are now, and we have like competition motorcycles that are competing at the biggest level, at the highest level on the biggest stages with gas motorcycles. And that's in 5 years, right? If we just put it in 5 year blocks. Now we got another 5 years that's coming from 2026 to 31. Like, what is that going to look like? So, you guys obviously went from starting with the Ultra B and believing that that was going to be the bike that could compete with gas bikes on like very particular circumstances, not necessarily on a track, because I think Electrix still has like a really hard time with wide open throttle stuff. We all know that, and it's something that I'm sure as battery technology increases, things will change there. But now you're stepping into what we're going to call the small market, the CMX, the Telarias, the
Yep.
Surons. And, from my perspective on our SR, we have the Arma shock and we got the Sirris forks, and we're crushing through the woods. And it changed the way that bike rides. Those forks, that setup is so incredibly good that I often ask myself, how many people are really going to get the benefit from a fork of this level, right?
Hmm.
And it not from, I just wonder that question, because
Yeah.
it's bomb proof, right? And it's not, I think, like, when you decide that you're going to buy that product and you're going to buy Cirrus and you're going to put it on your bike, like, you have to be pretty freaking diehard. So obviously you were building this, it's much heavier than stock stuff, so you're adding an additional on the SR. It's about 8.5, 9 pounds, I believe, something like that. And obviously that weighs down the bike, but you got a ton of power, so you don't really feel it. But on the smaller frame bikes, you're probably going to feel it a little bit more. What was your guys' thought process when you started developing the F43 for the smaller bikes, and like trying to like bring that to market?
Yeah. I think the reason we didn't do that first is we knew that market was developing very quickly, and I think we've seen that borne out as you go from like a light B to something like an SR or Ventus One Plus. I mean, these are radically different motorcycles in terms of weight and power and performance capability. And so, we first started the company, people were putting Fox 40s on their bicycle forks.
Crazy.
Yeah. And we wanted to wait a little bit until the equation became more appropriate because, again, like everything is by calculation and by the numbers, right? And now when you look at these bikes, you start getting close to 30 kilowatts and close to 200 pounds in some of these bikes. These are weights and power figures, and people are doing things with these bikes at the level that warrant a fork of that size. So that size, that 43, it's the same chassis size as KTM 85, as you
Yep.
know,
Yep.
which is lighter than an SR,
Yep.
right? And is ridden by a child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're in the range here where that fork is really appropriate if people are focused on wanting the best performance. We talk about, how do you make this for a pro athlete? It's part of it. We want to make a fork that allows people to win races, to have a clear advantage. I'm not a pro athlete.
Me neither.
I mean, I've ridden with them my whole career because I work in this industry. It makes me feel like I absolutely suck because I
Yeah.
know I'm way worse than they are.
Yeah.
But I think that that's the great thing about these enthusiast markets is you can be anybody and feel this level of performance and feel that confidence from the front end. It doesn't matter if you're going to win Glen Helen. You
Right.
can still appreciate having that magical ride where you're 30% better than you were before you made this
Yeah.
change, and you
It's
have
crazy.
so much confidence around the front end. Anybody can appreciate that. I got a Cirrus fork on my lap, but my wife's riding
I
it,
know.
and
Yeah.
and and she knows it's way better than what was on there before.
Yeah, she could just feel it, and that's the crazy part, right? Like, somebody who has no real engineering or motorcycle experience can be like, "Wow, that's the one thing everybody says." I mean, I will say the 25 Ultra B has a really good whatever they did to change their suspension. They made a
Yep.
significant change.
Yeah, for
It
sure.
is massively better. But you get on a bike like I said, like I'm 8-9 miles an hour faster, guaranteed. And it's just the confidence is there, like the ability to soak up the hits, the ability to speed through a whoop section or to hit a bunch of roots and rocks, and you don't lose your front end, right? Like you just stay planted and you're just tracking the entire time. So, but seeing these when people come into the shop and they look at the bike and with the SR with the Sirris on it, they're like, man, like, what's this bike cost? And you tell them, they're like, oh, like if they were to build it, right? Like that's
Sure.
MSRP, whatever. They're like, wow, that's expensive. I said, I know, but like, it's not a toy, like if I'm going out to just ride around with the kids in the backyard, I'm not getting on the SR. I'm also not getting on the Ultra B, right? I'm just not. I'm probably going to get on like a freaking Hyper B or a 2.0, like, just something that I can just cruise and I'm not like causing this big scene with. But that bike is a competition motorcycle. And I think that it's really hard for people to not rationalize it, but to understand that this is not just a toy. This is like a competition bike that you could win on. And it's just incredible that like it's came so far in such a short amount of time with bikes that are now, I mean, that SR's with his controllers 40 horsepower. We're pushing 450 power, through a 200-pound machine. It's incredible. I don't know.
You can
It's
ride
just
really fast. I'll tell you what surprised me about the small bikes. When you look at something like the SR um, or the Ventus One Plus, you can look at the weight, look at the power, and say, okay, we can justify a fork of this capability.
yeah,
And especially with the way that some of these experienced riders are riding them, that's a good idea to have
yeah,
a fork of that capability.
yes,
Um, here's what I didn't expect. We started making these forks for these higher powered motorcycles, and I put it on the Light B because I have it, right?
yeah, yeah,
That was not a target of the development. The Light B, the XB, the MX4, the E-Ride S, these type of bikes. We thought it's just going to be too much for those smaller bikes. We all think internally that Light B and that Zero XB, both those bikes, the way they work with that fork was a huge surprise for us. And what I would say is it's this tiny bike with this very, very capable front fork. And of course, like if you have a modified Light B, it makes more sense, right? Where you've added a whole bunch of power. But we can ride that Light B like such a nut. I mean, you can go so fast with that bike because I think it's geometrically good. Like its
right.
suspension, setup, and its kinematics are fundamentally pretty good. It's a well sorted bike. It's a well balanced bike. And now you have this package where you have this almost magical front end quality. Like I've never had that level of front end confidence from probably any KTM I've ever owned.
Right.
You can smash that Light B through anything
Yes.
at full throttle, like 80% of the time. It's just all full throttle. And you go out with a bunch of guys on those things in those CMX forks. I don't know if there's any motorcycle you'd have more fun on. I mean, they work great, and that was a surprise to me. I thought, it's just too much fork for this 6 kilowatt bike, and I'll tell you, it's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, and I asked myself that too. Is it like too much fork? And, when I try, because, there's, I don't want to sell something to somebody that just to sell it to them, right? So I often I often ask the questions of like, okay, so how do you ride, right? Like, what do you do, and what do you intend to do? Like, what is your preference? What do you think this bike is going to be used for best? And there more oftentimes than not, especially with the gas bike guys, the guys that come in that have been riding gas bikes their whole life, they've been racing, GNCC or motocross or whatever, and they want an SR because they're used to bigger power machines, right? And then we start talking about that they'll get the bike, and I'm saying, and I will tell them, listen, like the shocks and fork that come on the SR specifically are like extremely soft, and you're probably going to feel that right away. The bike's heavy. You're obviously a full grown man or woman, and you're going to feel you're going to notice it. And the best way to like get the bike to perform at the level in which you're used to with whatever factory stuff you have on your bike or what you're used to riding on your 450 or 250, like this is the next logical step. And then the inverse of that is when kids come in, like we call them wheelie kids, right? They come in, they want a bike that they can do a wheelie on. They want to make TikToks. And like, that's the thing. Like, I'm not trying to sell that fork to that kid, right? Like, you don't need it. You'll be fine on factory probably forever because all you're going to be doing is standing on the back wheel. You're going to wreck it a lot. You don't want to damage it. And that's, half the price of the motorcycle. So, you could probably stay where you're at. But I think there's, helping people understand where the market is going, because when I go to the races, we do events, not events, but we bring the van and we bring the tent, we bring bikes down to like all my son's big races. And like I bring a guy down from the shop and he's there just letting people ride the bikes around and like test them and talk about them and touch them and feel them, because a lot of people have never sat on one. They've only seen them on YouTube and there's nowhere for them to go to be able to like visually touch one of these bikes. And it's always interesting to see like their perception. When the bike is right for somebody, and this is kind of segueing down a rabbit hole, but when the bike is right for somebody because they come back with a smile on their face, right?
Yeah.
Like a dad will get on a bike,
Yeah.
he'll ride the 2.0 or, whatever. And he's like, it's all right. And then he'll get on 3.0, like, oh, that's a lot better, And then he comes back on the SR and he's like, got this big grin. He's like, that is crazy. And I'm like, I know. Like, that's where this is going. And, it's incredible to watch it. It's incredible to see it and be a part of it. For Sirris though, like where do you see the next big thing for Sirris? Has Sirris ever considered getting into anything that's not two wheels? And if you can't answer that, totally fine. Or is like this going to be where you continue to push the envelope for the next 5 years as this industry continues to blossom?
I think that's our plan. That's what we're trying to do for sure. Yeah, I really liked what you said about that experience on motorcycles, and I think that is this too much for an owner? Is such an individual question because it just comes down to how much somebody wants really good suspension.
Yeah.
If you want really good suspension, and we've all had bikes in our lives where you have good bikes and bad bikes, and most of the bikes are somewhere in the middle. But sometimes you have a bike and you get the setup just right and it's perfect, and you're like, my God, I go out on rides and it's magical.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
I feel like I'm the best rider in the world. I mean, I'm not, but like I feel like I can feel every single thing going into the corner and I can take it right to the edge of traction. I have so much confidence and I'm just messing with my buddies and nipping at their heels and all this sort of thing. So we're trying to make products that generate those experiences
Yeah.
on the motorcycles that exist in the market. And so I think if that is something somebody's interested in, really good suspension, that's what we're selling at whatever level you're at.
Right.
And and I think it's really that simple. We understand that it comes at a cost. The worst thing that we could ever do is, market that we're going to do all this for a very low cost.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We started this and said we're going to find the very best suppliers, we're going to use the very best materials, we're going to use the best architectures, because we know from our experience that you combine those things together and you get that incredible performance feel. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to sell the very best suspension. And so the customer base, whether it's on a light B or an SR, an Ultra B, or on a Dust, we hope that we're appealing to people that want that.
A question that I have that I think, I don't know if there's a lot of like really good information, so getting it from the source would be good. Rebuilds on like your forks, like a recommended time, because I can say I put over 1,000 miles on my forks, and shock on the Ultra B, and still haven't had it rebuilt to this day. No blown fork seals. I haven't had. I mean, we've taken some big hits, we've wrecked, we've done it all. What would be the recommendation from Sirris for somebody who's trying to maintenance their forks or their shock? Like how often and where would they be able to do that at if you have like a company that does that for you?
Yeah, yeah. There are recommendations on the website that I would refer to. It's worded better than I'll say it here, about number of hours for recreational use and racing use. I will say that the durability of the components has exceeded our expectations. I've worked with a couple new suppliers that I didn't work with at Fox on this project, and and I've been really impressed with the seals and bushings um, that we're using and how the durability is standing up. We're also using, premium oil, and that has a big effect on durability. We have seen a number of customers that have really, really high mileage well in advance of what we recommend for a rebuild.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, we haven't seen many problems. I think at Max, um, came in second at TKO. He sent us his suspension before the event. What did he say? Had like 150 hours on it or something, which you would never like. I mean, God, I would never do that on my KTM. I think
Yeah. Yeah.
the fork would eat itself. And this is Max.
Yeah. He goes hard.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen so many scratches on the outside from
I
the,
know.
the
Yeah.
hard aero stuff he does. Like
Yeah.
before the race, I took a magic marker and painted all the dropouts black again. Like this is an extraordinary abuse, but it was fine. It had
That's so
never,
crazy.
and the durability was fine. But then that kind of comes down to what we're doing. We use all 7,000 series alloys both for the chassis and the internal components, and we use a lot of hard anodize, and not just hard anodize, but we're really trying to control those anodized processes to get the best possible surface finish and surface hardness. And so when you combine those elements with the highest quality bushings, we use bushing supply that is the same that you might got in like a Honda CRF 450, and the seals that are very, very similar from the same manufacturer as what you would get on like a Honda CRF 450 or a Yamaha
Right.
1.
Right.
You combine all those elements where we're really trying to pull together technical aspects similar to like a KYB A kit fork that you might buy. You get really high durability, and that's what we've seen in the market so far.
Well, let me ask you this. So obviously this is like a personal question. I'm just curious for my own information. Sold the Stark, obviously just don't want to ride that bike. I have a 24 and a 25. The 24 Ultra B is just like the ultimate woods bike. I freaking love it. Enduro, like that whole thing. That's what that bike is. That's what it'll stay. The
Mm-hmm.
25, I'm toying with the idea of building an MX bike. My son races. He does a lot of training. I'm at the track a lot. And, I could ride my 24, but like I just prefer to ride that bike in the woods. So I was considering taking the 25 and making that a little bit different powertrain. Nothing crazy. I don't need 50 kilowatts or any of that, but I want to put like an MX fork on it. What can a customer expect from the difference in feel between a trail tune and an MX tune, and what are
Yeah.
the differences in those two? And I guess answer that first, and then my follow up question would be if it is would it be more conducive for somebody to get a trail tune and stiffen it up for the track, or conducive for somebody who rides mostly track to
Mm-hmm.
get an MX tune and stiffen it or soften it up for the woods? Like, what would you say like the best route there would be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll answer your prior question first.
Okay.
If anybody wants service, there's a number of service centers in the US and in Europe, and now the first one in Asia that I don't think it's live yet, but we're working on that. And so there's multiple places you can get service, and the service process is quite similar to a shell or a KYB fork or shock. And so I think for a trained suspension technician, it's familiar, I would say. And
Okay.
so if anybody has questions about that, they can get in touch with us through the website. And I think we should probably do something where we start posting those companies on the website, places like CCW that can perform
Yeah.
these services.
Just service centers to relative to your location, or just, a map. That would be super helpful, I think, for a lot of people. For sure. Definitely for me too.
Yeah, so service is no problem. There are a bunch of existing centers right now that do it for Sirris and that we physically trained. And then in terms of trail and MX, our approach is very similar to gas bikes. I think we have run into this challenge as we've gotten involved with this industry where some of the technology coming up was from bicycle.
Yeah.
And bicycles, I love riding bicycles. Just so you know, I've been riding mountain bikes for a long time, and I love EMTBs now. Love them.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, how can you not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, bicycles are funny because you have like one tune on a fork and shock, and it's like applied to the World Cup rider all the way to
Yeah.
like your kid's sister, right?
Right.
And
Right.
like
Right.
when people come from that world and they come into E-moto, they're like, oh, why can't you do that? And I think the point is that you can, but it's not optimal for whatever you do.
Right.
And so everybody that owns a gas bike, they know that you buy the gas bike, and if you're in Ohio, you're probably going to tune it a little bit for that usage scenario, and probably even get somebody to go into it and open it up and change the valving. So we thought, well, why don't we try to provide a couple different tunes for people so that they are less likely to have to buy a brand new product and open it up.
Right.
We're not an Andriani. We're not a factory connection. We don't tune everything for the individual person, but we can get closer. So the valve code on a trail fork and shock is fundamentally different than a moto setup. And I'll say this, like the moto setup is substantially better than a trail setup with clicker changes and preload changes.
So like when you say better, you mean like the noticeable difference between each individual click is greater?
No, I don't mean that. I mean, so when you're adjusting the clickers on a closed cartridge um, damper assembly in a fork or the Sirris shock, you're adjusting a bleed flow either through the base valve or the main piston or mid valve, right? And so you can do a lot with that. Um, and I think people who ride like open cartridge stuff are often surprised how adjustable a Sirris fork is, because that architecture and the bleed design that we have allows you to get a pretty reasonable amount of range. Like
Yeah.
you can make it work decently on a moto track. So I would say if you're a trail rider with the occasional moto
Yeah.
usage, you can make your trail fork and shock work pretty good on the moto track
Yeah.
if you know how to change the clickers. But a moto suspension has a fundamentally different valve stack and valving philosophy. And there's no question that if your focus is motocross, that's going to work better.
Right. Right.
And I would compare it to just a gas trail bike and a gas moto bike. It's kind of similar. You know, the valve stacks are just different.
Right. So I know that the MX tune is obviously going to be much stiffer, more responsive. And that's an assumption I'm making. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah,
my assumption would be that it's going to be a much more rigid feel than what somebody would be feeling on a trail tune. And a trail tune is kind of built for plushness in my from my perspective, from a layman. I don't know anything, but
yeah.
the MX tune would definitely be a more rigid experience for anybody who's considering that. But I know that you guys built that to withstand some pretty serious carnage, big jumps, heavy whoop sections. How much of the Cirrus, if you had to just guess, throw a dart at the dartboard, what's the percentage of sales from like MX and trail? And like, you guys don't have an enduro tune, but you have like an EBMX tune. Like, what does that look like for you guys? Is it like
Yeah.
85-90% of trail, and then just the rest just kind of fills in the other 10 or 15%?
You know, I don't know the exact number. I would expect it's probably 70% trail.
That's crazy.
Because I think the Ultra B, it's such a good trail bike, and I think a lot
Yeah, it is.
that way. It's funny because when modified with more power, it can be pretty darn fun motorbike. Work really well, feel really accessible to people on the moto track. Um, I mean, I've seen Brett Baldwin do amazing things on the
Yeah,
moto track with that bike,
yeah,
but I think it needs that modification because power is such a critical element of
yeah,
the like a full size moto track.
yeah. It's evident that you guys are always at the track. You guys are always there at big events, and you're always supporting people. And I think that that's an important part.
I think when you start a new brand, nobody can, well, for one, people have a lot of trouble differentiating you from every other company that isn't here and
Right.
isn't at the races and isn't involved. You see products come and go, and you have no idea what their story is or where they're coming from or what their commitment is to the market. Um, it was hard to start the company and have people say, you know, this is just like another faceless brand from a Chinese company that also makes
Right.
dishwashers. Like I was like, geez,
Right.
I put my retirement into this thing in order
Yeah,
for them
yeah,
to say I'm a faceless company that also makes dishwashers in China. I think that, but it is, genuinely difficult for customers to sort out who people are and what they're trying to do and what their commitment is.
right.
So we go to the races not really to tell our story, but because we think that what we're trying to do is provide the best possible suspension, which means we want to work with athletes. We want to prove our capability when racing. We want to stay connected to these markets. If I wasn't doing this for work, I'd probably want to be there anyways because that's
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
like to do.
yeah,
But I think it's so core to our brand promise that we're there helping people get the very best out of their suspension. And then one other point to add that I always used to say in the past as well, when you have really good suspension, you have this damper that has a lot of force capacity and low hysteresis and good predictability and low emulsion, right? For the fork, and then the shock is essentially the same because it's a sealed unit. So all those things can work to your advantage if you have them set up properly. And you can get that magical feeling and that incredible running confidence and all those things. If you don't have them set up properly, it works against you. All that fork capacity
yes,
is happening at the wrong times. And I think that when you have like a crappy open cartridge damper or a cheap fork, you can tell it's not great. But
right.
if
Yeah,
the setup's not perfect, it doesn't really matter that much either. I'm going to
right,
turn it 5 clicks, and I can't tell whether it's better or worse.
right,
I can tell it's maybe different, but not better or worse. And so we really try to go out there and show people how to set up their suspension for them, because that's where the magic is getting it perfectly set up for you. These motorcycles are a little bit smaller than traditional full-size gas bikes, which means that people's riding styles and body weights has a profound effect on the way the motorcycle is working. Rider A setup is rarely the same as rider B setup.
right,
And so we try to help people understand that and get the motorcycle set up so they can realize 100% of the available performance.
right.
That's what we're trying to do.
Well, I think, the just seeing you guys at TKO, knowing you were at the EMX World Championship, and just being involved, it matters. It matters because not everybody does that. Not everybody has the capacity. It's not cheap. Definitely not free for you guys to show up there. Not everybody is always there, but there's always enough people there to service the machines that are on the track or on at the event to help better understand what riders are feeling. And that type of development, that's real life stuff. That's not like, hey, we're going to go on a testing week and we're going to test with these guys and we're just going to see what problems we can basically create. These are real world problems and real world situations where the terrain is completely you don't have a blueprint of what it's going to look like, and it can change from moment to moment to moment. So how the kit is performing, and I think there's so much lost in it was definitely lost on me for a long time. Of There is so much deliberate relation between power and putting power to the ground and how the bike manages that comes from suspension. Like being able to effectively put power to the ground a lot of times comes from the way the suspension is built and the type of internals that they're using for this fork or for this shock. And there's a lot that gets lost there and people don't really understand, and that's okay because it's deeper in the weeds than what a lot of people truly understand. And like, to your point,
Yeah.
you don't really know if you clicked it 5 times and it made it better or it made it worse. What I can say is, Nate rode his 24 suspension for probably 600 or 700 miles before he upgraded to Sirris. And I mean, he had that bike so dialed in. And yeah, granted, like obviously his bike is much better now, and he enjoys it more. But like, you can go a long way with what you have if you understand the relation of the suspension components in the motorcycle and the power and how all of that kind of works together. And not everybody's going to have that deep of an understanding, but it's just incredible to see that some people can make something work that's definitely subpar for a lot longer than others, but it does give you a level of confidence that you really wouldn't have in any other way. And being able to go from a bike with regular suspension to a bike with Sirris, and it's like, wow, this is, you're faster, you feel better, you feel more confident, you're having that ride of your life. The sun is setting, the air is warm, the leaves are changing, right? Like all of that experience, you're able to digest in the moment because you're not constantly being chattered off the trail, or your arm pump isn't blasted. Like there's things to it. One more thing before we go, man, is obviously there's some stuff that's going on in the world, the geopolitical stuff. With all the changes and all the uncertainty, it seems like it appears from an outsider's perspective and a consumer's perspective that there's like a lack of innovation. That there's like a lack of drive and push to continue to develop. And our previous podcast episode had a lot of that. Like, I kind of touched on like what I see as a consumer, not as a person in the industry, but as a consumer, it seems like the death of some of these major brands that is occurring because whether they're not releasing or they've stopped innovating or whatever it is. Where do you see the industry personally from your perspective as an insider in the next 5 or 10 years? Like, where do you see it going, and what do you think
Yeah.
this will be?
Yeah, I think the year has been difficult in the industry just because it's difficult for these companies to figure out how to get the motorcycles into the country and to do it in a way where the tariff exposure still makes it profitable. And what we've seen is we saw so many developments get delayed
Yeah.
and so many launches get delayed, things that I can't talk about that are confidential to these companies, as they sort of waited for a more favorable business environment. And I think it affected Cirrus mostly from the standpoint of we're focused on the best performance. And we want to take the whole industry and raise the performance capability. And so I think when manufacturers are primarily focused on like, oh, how do I get the cheapest stuff into the country
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
limit my exposure because now is not the time to take risks.
Right.
I think that it definitely made it a difficult year for us. What I do know is that many manufacturers have developed some really interesting concepts. We talked about the two that are public, Benell and
Yeah. Yeah.
Dust.
Yeah.
Both of
Yeah.
them, by the way, gorgeous in person, in addition to being amazing motorcycles. But there are many more with many different flavors. And one of the ones we worked on was like the Zero XE, which is like a totally different concept and flavor of a motorcycle, not focused on competition, but like sort of a well-rounded, do all sorts of different things on it, more like a DRZ. I think that's the sign of a maturing market when you have these different flavors for the customer. And I think the industry is just trying to get organized again. I mean, I think I could probably count 10 or 12 motorcycles that haven't been released that I'm kind of wondering how they're going to work through that and push them towards the market. Batteries have gotten substantially better since they released the Ultra Beat. Motors have made an even bigger improvement. Software has seen huge improvements. And so from a technology standpoint, we have so much to look forward to as customers. And I'm kind of curious how that plays out over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think it's going to be cool to watch it continue to blossom. And there's in emerging markets, there's always like tons of opportunity, and there's a ton of opportunity in this market currently. And it's just fun to be a part of something that is like ever changing and it's rapidly increasing. And I off camera we talked about the Triumph and OSET kind of collaboration that they're doing to bring like Triumph building an electric dirt bike, right? Like when you start seeing that occur from major OEs, and that people that are like their whole business has been not that they didn't know that the electrification thing was like kind of it's imminent, but they're stepping into a world that they never even really knew was going to be like what it is. And it's really that provides like a different perspective, I think, for a lot of people, that we're going to see really big companies that we all know and love come out with products that we probably didn't expect them to, that is going to change the market in such an incredible way for the good, because obviously competition is something that's important for this to continue to grow. And we all know that aftermarket drives big changes in power sports and just any in Jeeps. It doesn't really make a difference, right? Aftermarket support is what makes this fun, because people like to, whether it's just like a unique color scheme or it's a particular product that they're used to having is going to be available on an electric dirt bike.
Hmm.
It's wild. It's a wild time, and it's an incredible place to be right now, kind of right in the middle of all of it, with all of these companies, and watching what you guys are going through and watching what all these other companies are trying to manage. And when the big guys start to take cracks at it, we know that we're on the right track.
Yeah, I would tell customers enjoy it. It's
Yeah,
going to be
no
really
doubt.
fun. I mean, I think we're going to see some continual big jumps. It's going to be great. It's going to be a great time to be a customer in the segment.
100%. Listen, Phil, I appreciate you coming on, man. I know that you got a busy schedule and you guys are always flying everywhere. And I'm sure you're probably even leaving here soon to go to another thing. So thank you for taking the time to come on the pod and just talk about Sirris and what you guys have done. It's it's been made my experience on the motorcycle incredible. I know you have done that for a lot of people, and your ability and willingness to talk directly to customers and be able to provide them support and information and help them with their motorcycles to have a better experience, to overall just drives the market in a positive way. And I hope and I wish that more companies come around that have the tenacity for the things that you're doing, and they bring all of that with them, and we can continue to grow this thing together, man.
Thanks for the opportunity, and thank you to all of our customers. We really appreciate it.